Tonight, flights to Tehran were canceled across the board. Turkish Airlines, ATA Airlines, Qeshm Air, all grounded. Then Saturday's flights were pulled too. Then a flight to Tabriz in northwestern Iran, canceled. No explanation, no official statement, just silence. And here is what you need to understand about that. Governments issue travel warnings. Militaries deploy ships. Diplomats make speeches, but airlines cancel flights for one reason. Because their insurance companies, their security teams, and their intelligence contacts have told them the airspace they are about to fly through may not be safe in the next 24 hours. Airlines do not cancel flights over politics. They cancel flights over risk. And tonight, the risk over Iran just became too high to fly. Welcome to the Sand Table. This is briefing number 10. First, don't forget to subscribe. Now let me walk you through what happened today because this was the most consequential day of this crisis since it began. Not because of one event, but because every signal, diplomatic, military, economic, and now commercial, is now pointing in the same direction. And that direction is not toward a deal. This morning, President Trump walked across the south lawn of the White House toward Marine One and stopped to speak with reporters. He was asked directly whether the United States would use military force against Iran. His answer was measured but unmistakable. He said he would love not to use the military, but sometimes you have to. He said the United States has not made a final decision. He said they would have additional talks later today. But when asked whether there could be a long, drawn-out conflict, he paused and said, "I guess you could say there is always a risk." That alone would have been the story of the day. But Trump was not done. Hours later, in Corpus Christi, Texas, the president went significantly further. He said he is not happy with the negotiation. He said the Iranians do not want to go far enough. And then he said something that may have ended the diplomatic track entirely. His words, "I say no enrichment. Not 20%, not 30%. They always want 20%, 30%. They want it for civilian. I think it is uncivil." Stop and think about what just happened. For weeks, the negotiation has been about where the enrichment line should be drawn. Iran offered to suspend enrichment activity for 3 to 5 years. The American team in Geneva pushed for permanent restrictions. Technical teams were supposed to meet Monday in Vienna to work through the mechanics. And today, the President of the United States said publicly, no enrichment, period. Not a cap, not a limit, zero. That is not a negotiating position. That is an ultimatum. And it directly contradicts what Iran's senior cleric declared sacred from the pulpit at Friday prayers this morning in Tehran. The gap between these two positions is not a negotiation gap. It is a wall. And today, the President of the United States built it higher. When reporters asked how close he is to making a decision on a strike, Trump said, "I would rather not tell you." And when pressed on regime change, he responded, "There may or may not be regime change in Iran. Nobody knows." Now let me tell you about the weapon that nobody saw coming. Because while the president was speaking, Bloomberg broke a story that changes the military equation in ways that have not been discussed on any news broadcast tonight. The Pentagon has activated its first dedicated kamikaze drone unit. It is called Task Force Scorpion. It evolved from an experimental program and is now fully operational, embedded within the largest American military buildup since the 2003. The unit operates a weapon system called LUCAS, Low-Cost Unmanned Combat Attack System. These are one-way attack drones manufactured by a company called SpectreWorks in Arizona. Each drone costs approximately $35,000. They are designed for autonomous strike missions, reconnaissance, and maritime operations. They can be deployed in large numbers against distributed targets, and they are ready to fly tonight. But here is the detail that should make every military analyst sit up straight. The Lucas drone was reverse-engineered from Iran's Shahed 136, the same kamikaze drone that Iran sold to Russia, the same drone that Russia used to devastate Ukrainian power infrastructure, the same drone that became the most recognizable weapon of the Ukraine war. The United States took that design, improved it, mass-produced it, and is now preparing to use it against the country that invented it. Think about the strategic irony. Iran built the Shahed as a cheap, expendable weapon to terrorize its enemies. Now a fleet of American copies is sitting in the Middle East, pointed back at Iran. A defense analyst at the Hudson Institute, Brian Clark, explained to Bloomberg what Task Force Scorpion is designed to do. He said the drones would be effective against softer, distributed targets in Iran, missile production facilities, road networks, launch sites. He noted that these kinds of targets require a lot of dispersed attacks that inexpensive drones are well suited to deliver. And then he added something devastating. Iran does not have much of an air defense network anymore, so they may not be able to shoot down many. That last sentence tells you everything. After Operation Midnight Hammer last June, after Israel's strikes on air defense systems, Iran's ability to defend its own airspace is severely degraded. And now the United States is preparing to exploit that gap with a weapon Iran itself pioneered. Task Force Scorpion is not replacing the F-22s, the F-35s, the carrier-based strike aircraft, or the cruise missiles. It is an additional layer. Think of it as the cleanup crew. The stealth fighters go in first and destroy the hardened targets, the underground enrichment facilities, the command bunkers, the radar systems. Then Task Force Scorpion floods the battlefield with hundreds of expendable drones that hunt down everything else. Missile launchers, fuel depots, communication nodes, vehicle convoys. The things that are too numerous and too spread out for a $500,000 cruise missile, but perfect for a $35,000 drone that does not need to come home. This is not your father's air campaign. This is a new kind of war. Precision at the top, volume at the bottom. And the Pentagon just told the world it is ready. Now let me take you to Washington because the diplomatic channel had its most revealing moment today. Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi flew to Washington and met Vice President Vance this afternoon. Oman has been the mediator in every round of these talks. After the meeting, al-Busaidi posted on social media that he had shared details of the ongoing negotiation and the progress achieved. He said peace is within reach. But then he sat down for an interview with CBS, and the interviewer asked him directly, "Is there a chance of the United States attacking Iran overnight?" His answer, "I cannot answer that question because I do not know." Let that sink in. The man who has been sitting between the American and Iranian delegations for 3 rounds of talks, the mediator with more access to both sides than anyone else on earth, just told a national television audience that he does not know if the United States will strike Iran tonight. That is not a diplomatic hedge. That is a man who has seen the gap between both positions and understands that the bridge may not hold. Al-Busaidi added that he believes Trump sincerely wants a deal. He said the president is passionate about a diplomatic solution. But passion and patience are not the same thing, and today the president's patience appeared to run out on live television. Now let me take you inside Iran, because what happened there today is something Western media has barely covered, and it tells you more about the regime's mental state than any official statement. Over 500 Iranian public figures, described as celebrities, academics, and civil society leaders, signed an open letter today with one message: no to war. The letter was published in Iranian media and circulated widely on social platforms. On the surface, it looks like a patriotic call for peace, but look deeper. An Iranian lawyer named Hassan Asadi Zaidabadi examined the list of signatories and published his findings. He said many of the names were employees of the president's office, advisors to cabinet ministers and staff of state-owned companies and government funds, presented as political activists. He called the initiative deceptive. This is the regime manufacturing the appearance of grassroots opposition to war, because the regime itself is terrified of what is coming. When a government has to fabricate a peace movement to demonstrate that its people do not want to be bombed, that government knows the bombs are coming. And the internal media coverage was even more telling. Iran's official IRNA news agency, which is essentially the government's mouthpiece, published a remarkable sentence today. It wrote that if the negotiations fail, the situation will move toward dangerous ambiguity and a possible military conflict. Then it added, "Successful negotiation in Geneva is the only way to prevent a new war." That is the Iranian government's own news agency telling its own people that diplomacy is the only thing standing between them and war. That is not confidence. That is a warning. Meanwhile, former Foreign Minister Manouchehr Mottaki addressed the United States using language associated with Tehran's street fighters. Coded slang meant to signal that this time, Iran means business. He was widely mocked online. A hardline member of parliament named Abul Fazl Zoravand warned Washington against targeting Khamenei in language too crude to repeat. Just days earlier, the same man had declared that Trump is not brave enough to attack Iran. There is a pattern here: bluster from the politicians, fear from the institutions, and silence from the military commanders who would actually have to fight. And then there was Friday prayers. I need you to understand the mechanics of what happened today in Tehran in a way that most Western analysts miss entirely. Friday prayers in Iran are not a sermon. They are the single most powerful communication channel the supreme leader has to the nation. When Ayatollah Khatami speaks from the minbar in Tehran, he is not sharing his personal opinion. He is delivering Khamenei's final position through divine authority. Every word is vetted, every sentence is calibrated, and the audience is not just the faithful. It is the military commanders, the government officials, the intelligence services, and every diplomatic corps monitoring from embassies around the world. When that pulpit declares enrichment sacred and non-negotiable, it is not rhetoric. It is policy transmitted through the only channel that outranks a diplomatic cable in the Islamic Republic, the voice of God as interpreted by the supreme leader's chosen representative. No negotiator can walk that back. No diplomat can soften it. No technical team meeting in Vienna on Monday can pretend it was not said. And that is the impossible geometry of this crisis. Washington demands zero enrichment permanently. The president said it today on live television. Tehran declares enrichment sacred from the highest religious authority in the country, also today. These are not two positions on a spectrum that can be bridged with creative language. These are two absolutes, and two absolutes cannot coexist at a negotiating table. Senator Lindsey Graham, who has been one of the most vocal voices on Iran throughout this crisis, published a Fox News opinion piece yesterday that captures the mood in Washington. He compared Trump's pressure campaign to Ronald Reagan's stand against the Soviet Union. He wrote that Iran is facing a Berlin Wall moment and that history is watching every move we make. Graham argued that supporting the Iranian people could lead to a political transformation comparable to the fall of the Berlin Wall itself. This is coming from a senator who told Sky News Arabia just 8 days ago that the U.S. decision regarding Iran has already been made and that the ships are not arriving in the area only because the weather is pleasant. Graham met with Netanyahu. He toured the Gulf states. He spoke with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And he came back to Washington with a message that the inflection point is weeks away, not months away. That was 8 days ago. Tonight it looks like weeks has become days. Now let me connect this to the analysis that matters most tonight. The Center for Strategic and International Studies, one of the most respected think tanks in Washington, published an assessment today on how Iran would respond to a U.S. attack. Their conclusion: Iran is likely to prefer a proportional response that limits regional escalation. The analyst noted that the regime is already confronting a second round of internal protests and cannot afford a sustained conflict. They pointed to Iran's historical pattern of substituting cyber operations for direct military retaliation, and they warned that there is a tipping point. The more missiles each side fires, the more gravity pulls both sides toward a larger war. But here's the critical finding. CSIS assessed that Iran's immediate goal would be to limit sustained U.S. strikes and prevent other Gulf states from joining the fight. The regime knows that if Saudi Arabia, the UAE, or other regional powers allow their airspace or bases to be used, Iran faces a coalition, not just a single adversary. That analysis aligns with what Hezbollah said yesterday, that it will not intervene if U.S. strikes remain limited. Iran's most powerful proxy has already stepped aside. Now the analysts are saying Iran itself will try to keep things contained. The entire deterrence architecture that Tehran has spent 40 years building is crumbling in real time. Let me put the timeline together for you. Monday, technical teams are scheduled to meet in Vienna at the IAEA. These are the nuclear engineers and sanctions lawyers who are supposed to translate whatever Geneva produced into an actual framework. But after the president said no enrichment today, what exactly are they negotiating? The foundation of any deal was always some level of enrichment with verification. Trump just removed that foundation. Also Monday, Secretary of State Rubio arrives in Israel. His trip was moved up from the original schedule. Rubio designated Iran as a state sponsor of wrongful detention just yesterday, the language of a government building a legal case, not a diplomatic one. When the Secretary of State visits Israel at the same time technical talks are happening in Vienna, he is there to coordinate what happens if Vienna fails. Behind all of this, the force is in position. 2 carrier strike groups, the Gerald Ford now positioned off Israel's northern coast, and the Abraham Lincoln on station in the Sea of Aden. Over 300 combat aircraft spread across the region. At least 24 F-22 Raptors deployed or staging. F-35s operating from Jordan. F-15E Strike Eagles. F-16s at Diego Garcia. Task Force Scorpion operational with its fleet of Lucas kamikaze drones. 85-plus aerial refueling tankers distributed across the theater so no single strike can destroy the refueling fleet. Patriot and THAAD missile defense batteries deployed to protect every forward base. Attack submarines operating beneath the surface that no satellite can track. And approximately 40,000 American troops in the region, the largest concentration of U.S. military power in the Middle East since 2003. Qatar Airways has already canceled all flights to Iran through June 30th. Not through next week, through June. The airline is planning as if the disruption is not temporary. It is planning as if the disruption is the new reality. And tonight, Istanbul joined the list. The last major international hub still connecting Iran to the outside world just went dark. In the last 12 hours, the president said no enrichment. Iran's cleric said enrichment is sacred. The Omani mediator said he does not know if an attack could come overnight. Bloomberg revealed America's secret drone weapon. Turkey canceled flights to Tehran without explanation. Iran's own media warned its people that war is the alternative to a deal. And 500 Iranians were recruited to sign a letter begging for peace that nobody believes is genuine. Every previous briefing I have told you the pieces are moving. Tonight the pieces have stopped moving. The question now is singular and it belongs to one person. Does the President of the United States believe that Monday's talks in Vienna can produce something he has already publicly rejected? Because the man who said no enrichment today is the same man who will decide whether to give Vienna a chance on Monday. And every indicator I have tracked over 10 briefings tells me the answer to that question is getting harder to find. I will be tracking Vienna and Rubio's arrival in Israel. That is when we find out whether this weekend was the pause before the storm, or the last quiet night before everything changes. There is one more thing I want to leave you with. In every conflict I have studied, there is a moment when the machinery of war becomes self-sustaining. When the deployments, the positioning, the intelligence preparation, the diplomatic dead ends, and the political rhetoric reach a mass so large that stopping them requires more energy than letting them go. I am not telling you we have reached that point. I am telling you that tonight, for the first time in 10 briefings, I cannot tell you we have not. 40,000 troops, 2 carriers, 24 Raptors, 300 aircraft, Task Force Scorpion, no flights to Tehran, a president who said no enrichment, a supreme leader who said enrichment is sacred, a mediator who said he does not know what happens tonight, and a Monday deadline that may arrive without the diplomatic foundation it was supposed to stand on. If you have been watching these briefings from the beginning, you understand this crisis better than most people covering it. If you are new, briefings 1 through 9 are in the description. They are not optional. They are the context for everything you are about to watch unfold. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to understand what is happening before Monday arrives. I will see you at the next briefing.